A judge yesterday sentencing Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh's attempted assassin to just 8 years in prison. Federal prosecutors had asked for 30 years. The Biden-appointed judge cited mitigating factors, including that the would-be killer identifies as transgender and turned himself in after a change of heart. Attorney General Pam Bondi, posting on X, the attempted assassination of Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh was a disgusting attack against our entire judicial system by a profoundly disturbed individual. The Justice Department will be appealing this woefully insufficient sentence imposed by the district court, which does not reflect the horrific facts of the case. Let's bring in Adam Guillette, president of Accuracy in Media. So, Adam, what do you think of this 8-year sentence for a would-be judicial assassin?
Well, I think it's proof that every facet of our lives now has become politicized, including the Justice Department. This is the kind of sentence you would expect from a George Soros prosecutor, not a federal judge. The conspirators who had planned to kidnap the governor of Michigan, they got 16 years, twice the sentence that this person got. And Kavanaugh's loved ones now every day are going to live in fear that some sort of attack might actually happen. This sentence is a joke, and it's proof that it's politicized.
So it's in some respects, when the judge says, the would-be assassin was transgender, there are a lot of things I could think of that would qualify somebody for an easy sentence that would be more important than that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The fact that the would-be assassin was transgender doesn't change the ramifications that Kavanaugh's family has to deal with. I do a lot of campus activism, and I spent about a year getting swatted 13 times. My wife and I got detailed death threats with our home address every day. Just like Kavanaugh, thankfully, nobody really acted on it, but it doesn't change the fear you have when you leave your loved one at home. It doesn't change the fear my wife has when I visit college campuses. They caused great harm to Kavanaugh and his family, this person did, and they absolutely deserve a real sentence as opposed to a politicized slap on the wrist.
Yeah, because, if I had a Supreme Court justice in my family, I would be proud of it. I would maybe want to broadcast it to the world, but they have to be very cagey and reserved about this now.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And what we need to see is a colorblind, apolitical justice system, not the kind of justice system where the people who complain about microaggressions get arrested when taking over rooms on college campuses and have their charges dropped. Because if we don't count on the Justice Department to bring about retribution as is needed or to correct people, you're going to see vigilantes act up. You're going to see people take the law into their own hands. The only thing that we can do to prevent that is for government to do their job, for people to get the sentences they deserve, and for them to keep politics out of the courtroom.
I want to put up a quote from Carrie Severino, the Judicial Crisis Network president. She writes, Judge Boardman's explanation for granting Rosca, the intended assassin here, leniency is absurd. So claiming you are transgender gets you less time in prison? That's a great incentive program. What an outrageously dangerous signal to send as political violence is on the rise. This sentence is a disgrace. I'm guessing you would agree with that.
Well, we're seeing them normalize political violence, and we see this taught in education now. In every facet of K through 12 education, they push this DEI nonsense, which breaks down the world into oppressors and oppressed and justifies violence by saying it's merely resistance to oppression. So what can we expect when we're training and teaching young minds that violence is justified? What can we expect when we're saying, well, this is Hitler, these are fascists, you've got to punch a Nazi? You need to stop justifying and defending and normalizing political violence and the rhetoric associated with it.
Let's talk about another strange case in the news right now. Ian Roberts, the guy who had been hired to head the Des Moines school system, largest in Iowa, and it turns out he has quite a record. I want to put some of that up on the screen right now. He was charged with criminal possession of narcotics with intent to sell back in July of '96. In November of '98, third-degree unauthorized use of a vehicle in New York, that charge dismissed. In November of 2012, a conviction for reckless driving, unsafe operation, and speeding in Maryland. Then charges for second-degree criminal possession of a weapon, third-degree criminal possession of a weapon, and fourth-degree weapon charges. convicted of unlawful possession of a loaded firearm in Pennsylvania back in 2022. And it goes on and on, charged with being an illegal alien in possession of a firearm in 25. Now, that's as a result of his arrest by ICE agents. How does a guy like this get to be the superintendent of schools?
Well, I have to say it again. It's 3 letters, DEI. This guy was clearly an expert at deception, but so is the school board. They hired a consulting firm obsessed with DEI, and they got exactly what they paid for. And the consulting firm actually pointed out some of the lies, but the district hired him anyway. You know, we do a lot of hidden camera investigative journalism at Accuracy in Media. I've been undercover in pretty much every school district in the Des Moines area. And these administrators, the superintendents there, brag to me about ignoring laws related to critical race theory and DEI because their priority isn't educating young people. Their priority is pushing an ideology. Just as this consulting firm said he's the right candidate for the job because he's a radical ideologue, he does DEI speeches on the side. As I said, they got exactly what they paid for.
Even his record of academic achievement had a lot of holes in it. Let's put it that way. Adam Guillette, we wish we could talk to you more. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.